G'day, it's your old mate Matthew here. Welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. In this episode, we have a good yarn with Richard Malloch. We discuss the positive attraction of running communities, specifically Hagley Park Run and the Achilles Running Club. I think the interesting thing I find about it is that it's not so much about the running, it's the coffee and yarns afterwards, and how 10 years of being the race director for Hagley Park Run, really considering how you create an environment where everyone's welcome. I think that's a really positive thing. And the other really interesting thing was about how he has been supporting people with disabilities and impairments to achieve great things with running through the Achilles Running Club. And I think that's just really, really, really fascinating and interesting. Hope you enjoy the yarn as much as I did. Hello and welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. This evening we have Richard Malloch in the high-tech podcast studio. How are you, Richard?
Oh, I'm great, thanks. Yeah, good to see you, Matthew.
Yeah, good to have you here. Well, Richard's has been one of the, the founders of Hagley Park Run, which is one of New Zealand's most successful and well-attended running groups, as well as a few others. And we're going to get into hearing more of his yarn and the benefits and the way to go about building a good community. But before we do that, we'll go through our usual questions. What have you struggled with in the last week?
I guess I'm coming out of a few struggles that have been 6 months long. So my current struggles are really trying to fit everything in, which is a normal one. But I've kind of been through a 6 month period, which you would say is kind of interesting, where my wife got cancer. My father was in dementia care, and then he passed away in February.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Had one of my running friends got cancer, come back about October, and he passed away in January. I got made redundant from a job in November, and another running friend died of a stroke sort of early March. So it was a kind of an interesting 6 months, you might say.
There's a bit going on there.
A little bit, yeah.
How are you now through that?
Surprisingly well, to be honest. So it's, I guess, a lot of those things I'm through, and now it's a case of not trying to take on too much again, to have a reasonable balance again.
Yeah, that sounds like some sage advice to yourself.
Yeah, as my wife would remind me time and time again. Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, and we're going to get into this. You built this big community, and when you're so emotionally invested in these different things, you're obviously hugely generous with your time. It must be hard for you to say no, is it?
It's a little like that. There's a lot going on. The more people you know, and yeah. I also set myself some personal challenges in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably not helpful at all. So like last weekend, I had a crack at running around Christchurch. So there's a trail, the Christchurch 360 org trail, and it's about 140 kilometres long.
Okay.
And I thought I'd have a crack at doing that, and I'd failed twice before recently, and so I set off last Friday, and I managed to run fairly well. Went through the night, got to the next morning and had to give up. So I run myself into the ground. So that was 95 kilometres of running. So it was probably not kind of the thing to fit in, but anyway, it was a challenge that was out there.
I mean, running is a great outlet for these things, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to have that time by yourself. Watch the sunset, watch the moon rise, watch the sun come up again. That's still the same run.
What's the track? What's the track for that one?
The track?
Yeah.
So it loops up a whole lot of trails that exist, and then kind of navigates ways between them. So effectively I went from the airport out to McLean's Island, to the Waimak River, down to Brooklands, through Burwood Forest, New Brighton, out to Sumner, and then it heads across the top of the mountains the Crater Rim Trail through to about Hullswell Quarry, and then from there it cuts its way through into Reckitt Bush, and then out to the airport.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, it's a,
That is a full lap. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. If you could survive it.
Yeah. Maybe in future.
Yeah.
What's something you want to work on in the next week?
Okay, so the next week it's probably getting a bit of a balance back at home would be what I'm wanting to achieve. Yeah, so and enough time with my wife at home, and we've got a few things to finish off, some landscaping and things. So yeah, it might be nice to be around home a little more.
Well, we've got a long weekend as well, which
Yeah, that'll help.
yeah. How is your wife?
So she's got through her cancer. I'd say
good.
cured, but quite tired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would say she works hard and then needs all the rest of the time to recover. So,
Yeah.
So she's a bit tired on it still.
Understandable.
Yeah.
What are you proud of?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I kind of see it like a tree. So I'm proud at the centre that, and I've got a good working relationship with my wife, and we've been married 35 years.
Nice.
I'm proud of the kids around the outside, proud of the friends and things I've got around, and some of the things that are going on. So yeah, I sort of look at that in layers, I guess.
Yeah, I've not heard the tree analogy before. I like that.
Oh, okay.
There we go. There's
You offer me these challenging questions.
yeah, you've thought about it. What gives you hope?
I see a lot of things that give me hope, actually. I see a lot of people doing amazing things. I see my children contributing at some levels that I would never imagine at their young ages. I see communities like the Hagley Park Run who are growing and supporting others. I see a lot of people doing positive things. I think there's a whole lot to sort of look at and go, this is good.
It's a very positive outlook. I like that. So let's go back a few years. So running's one of your things.
Sure is.
What got you into running?
So as a young fella, my father was a runner, so I'd tag along and do various runs with him. I guess I had another go at that early 20s, which was really running for myself at that point. And then I really didn't run until mid-30s or so, and then picked it up again, I guess, as a exercise initially.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, recently, it's become more about running communities. So it's been around groups like Hagley Park Run. There's another group I'm on the fringes of, Achilles, who run with people with disabilities and make it quite possible for them to participate in all sorts of normal things. If normal, well, for me anyway, is running things like the Paparoa Trail.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make that possible for people who are blind, say, to come with us.
That's cool.
Hang out, etc. Yeah, and then I've got some other small running groups. I thought that Hagley Park Run was getting quite big, and it'd be nice to have something small for people to connect into. So set up another running group on a Wednesday morning, nice and early. It hasn't grown much, but it's cool to hang out with a small group of people and
less intimidating for people getting to running. So I think I've done 2 park runs. I did the anniversary one, I think, which must have been, was it one of your last ones or first one not doing it? Yeah. I just think it's just such a fantastic group. When you get hundreds, it was close to 1,000 on that on the anniversary one I went to, but it's such a cool thing. Let's rewind back the 10 years when you first or got involved in the parkrun space? How did that come about?
So I think I saw an advert in a paper or something, and it said there was a free event on. You turn up and you run 5Ks, and it had been running around the world and was now in Christchurch. So I was lucky enough to see that and turned up for the first one. And it was interesting in that there was no commitment to it. So if you want to run, come along. There were no barriers. It was free. There was no admin. You just sort of ran. And if you didn't feel like turning up, well, you didn't have to. So that was good. And, I quite enjoyed the personal challenge of that. But pretty quickly, you're turning up on a Saturday morning with the same people all the time, and you get to start to know them and know them a bit better, and then you can sense that, hey, well, you can help out and volunteer, and that gives another dimension to it. So there was this really unique environment that was like one of the third places in the world. You got home, you got work, and then this was this third space in the world. And it had such a variety of people. So anyone can go. And it was welcoming to people who just wanted to walk, or run slowly, or getting into exercise. So it was suddenly a place that was quite welcoming, no matter where people were at in terms of exercise. And then it obviously attracts people who are a little bit positive, because you got up at a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock and went along.
Well, running's highly addictive, and
Yeah.
brings with it a lot of positives.
Yeah. But the other aspect was really coffee afterwards, and I got into a group that we met and just had coffee, and that became actually more important than the running. So there are times where you can't run or whatever, or there's partners of people, and they come along for the coffee, not the run beforehand, because it's more important. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then that coffee group, we've developed into going out for dinner and movies and what have you. But then, you go through life's events together as well. So it was interesting that, what come along and run and just do something for yourself. You connect with other people, and then suddenly you've got, you're plugged into something. And it's a group of people that support each other, and it's been an interesting kind of environment. It was a side effect of just hanging out together.
So I'm such a massive fan of the third space, and people being able to have one really close to home.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of a 15-minute city, but in Christchurch, everyone's sort of 20 minutes away from Hagley Park, maybe a bit longer. What have been some of the successes of that community, and equally the challenges of developing that community over 10 years?
So some of the successes I saw was that very quickly became about an environment that was about supporting the people, not winning the race. It was an environment that just was open for people to contribute or be part of it, whatever level they wanted to. So if you didn't want to volunteer, you didn't have to. If you wanted to dress up or give it some energy or whatever, the environment was there as well. So one of the things that I always used to think about was, what happens if somebody came along for the first time and no one spoke to them? So how do you create an environment where everyone's going to be welcome or talked to or whatever? And when you're trying to do that with 800 or 900 people, it kind of becomes an interesting focus. Like, how do you make that happen? And I think it's just about some of the circles of people just connecting and having an environment where you deliberately welcome everyone at the start, you celebrate everybody's finish, you have a culture of just talking to not strangers, but people you haven't met, just asking how their run went, or how'd you find that, or just connecting in. It's about, there might be someone turned up for volunteering, you go, I'm off for coffee, why don't you come along? And then the next week, I remember one story where one of the older guys that helped out, and he volunteered, and I said, come along for coffee, yeah? And then I wasn't there the next week, and one of my friends saw him and said, oh, come back for coffee. And then pretty soon he plugged in, and that was a big part of his week. You know, he was in his 80s, but he loved coming along. And he would give unsolicited life advice to the young fellas at the table, because he could. And he got so here's this connection between people of, you know, generations here. And then one day, you know, he wasn't there. And people noticed that and rang him to see, you know, how he is. And his family answered the phone. And unfortunately, he had a stroke. But, you know, we got a chance to go in and say goodbye and, you know, come together to farewell him, etc. So that was just those accidental moments, but the environment's set up for those to happen.
This is that's such a special story, such a special moment, and that's the, you know, well-connected community that you notice when people aren't there, and you've got the facility to reach out and check in. I mean, that's the way it should be, and that's so special.
Yeah, and what, that's not an unusual story. Like, I hear about how life-changing it is for a lot of people. You know, and obviously but it's been running for 10 years, and you lose people. And some people are terminally ill, and I guess you get to see what people's priorities are when you've only got weeks to live. And I remember one guy, he was in obviously quite a bit of pain in hospital. The only thing that got him out of bed was to come and volunteer at parkrun. And he would get put in a wheelchair and come along and marshal still. It was such a big draw of his week that even though he was, you know, in some kind of a terminal situation, and he got through that pain barrier to come and be part of it. And it's just, so that sort of illustrates what it meant just to hang out and have that purpose and connection with people and things, that you would choose that as one of the last things you give up.
Wow, I mean, I was thinking I'd need to come and volunteer. Now I've got no excuses. I've
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, was this a sales pitch?
Bring your own wheelchair.
Yeah. So one of the things around creating trust and vulnerability is a shared activity.
Yeah.
And the big question is always, how can we create trust and vulnerability as quick as possible? Well, in your case, in the case of parkrun, it's how quickly can you run 5K, right?
Yep.
And that can be, well, I don't know, what could you run? What's your PB for a parkrun? A 5K.
So my PB is 18 minutes 40, say, somewhere around there. What I could run today is probably about 22 and a half minutes, although I think I can still run 20.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept that people actually don't go in to win the race, because they obviously can't. But they say they're not competitive, but they'll turn up, but they'll know who's around them each week and whether they're ahead of them or behind them, or how they did last week. So people become competitive amongst the group around them or within themselves. So it's quite interesting. Like, they don't go for the competition, but there is quite an element of that there.
Well, I mean, I feel like for myself, running's, it's a competition with yourself and your mind, and there's markers. Right?
Yeah.
So how did the coffee start? Was it right? Started on a miserable cold day. You went for a run, and then decided you needed to warm up.
So again, having coffee afterwards is part of the parkrun culture, and we had the Ilex Cafe, but it's a little bit. It's across the river, and you've got to go out of your way and across the footbridge. So it didn't naturally flow, but one of my friends just said, "Hey, why don't we go out for coffee?" To a few of us, and that was really the catalyst behind that, and that might have been 5 years ago or so. And then the group's just grown from there. You know, people come along and some stay, and you know, we kind of rearranged the Ilex Cafe now to keep adding tables on. And
well, yeah, you probably need to open the full kind of event space in the side of it there too, right?
Yeah, potentially.
This is, I mean, we could go a lot of different ways here. Running is a bit of a religion, right? And There's the press article, was it last year, about forget dating apps, join a running club.
Yes, I've heard that. So for young people, I think that's quite a thing worldwide. And there's a couple of groups, that people meet up. But it's interesting that there are other running groups that are, adults, etc. But one of my friends, he met his new partner through that, and he's now 60.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so interesting that happens at that age too.
Yeah. I wonder if it happens to the first person joining it and they haven't ran for a while and they're a bit unfit. Perhaps not.
No. We can do a promo.
Yeah. Talk to me about, was it R. Kelly's running club?
Mm-hmm.
Because this sounds
Sure.
fascinating.
Yeah, so my involvement with the Kellys became, was a slow introduction. So one of my friends who was blind, he had decided he had a little bit of vision, and he decided he'd run by himself. And I remember just being ahead of him and heard the horrific noise as he ran into a pole. Oh, you can imagine running into one of those hollow octopus poles. So I just said to him, look, if you've got no one else to guide you next week, I'm around, and just give me a yell. So bumped into him next week, and sure enough, he hadn't organised anyone. So we ran, and then he was training for the New York Marathon, and so I got involved in helping him do some of the longer runs, and so we hung out that way, and then he had a running group on a Tuesday night, so 6 or 7 of us would go and do that. So I did that with him. So that really was my introduction. I couldn't get fully involved. There's sort of sessions on Sunday and different events around the country, etc. But I could get involved with a few athletes and help them out. Yeah, and I guess one of the aims is that people can participate in normal activity. So it kind of struck me earlier this year where a group of 8 of us went across to the west coast and stayed in some cabins and things and did an adventure over ran the Papara Trail, 55 kilometres, motivated by the pub kitchen shut at 8 o'clock. So we had the entire day focused on being there at 7:30 to get our orders in, which we did. And one of my friends there is also a blind runner, but it was just a group of people out having a fantastic time, and it wasn't the fact that he was blind or anything. He was just one of the people. So to me, that achieved the objective, was that you could do these normal adventures, and normal for me is a little extreme. And just hang out together.
Yeah.
And we'd achieve that, right?
So talk to me about. I'm just really interested in this, in that type of running and supporting the community. How does it work? Is there any? Are you running side by side? Are you tied together, or what? How does that actually work?
So if it's a road event, we can have like a large rubber band between us, and you're holding a rubber band, and you're using verbal instructions to describe the dangers or the challenges ahead and which way we're turning. So generally on a road or footpath, it's not too difficult. Just trying to remember your left and right is a challenge. Like you've got to remember the left, and they've got to interpret it as left for that to happen.
You'd have to get really good at communicating, right?
You do. Yeah.
There must be a level of fitness required to support.
So it becomes difficult when you're chatting and there's 2 or 3 changes of direction and you've got to remember your lefts and your rights and etc. So that's where it becomes challenging with a whole set together. But that doesn't quite work when you go off-road.
Yeah, I bet.
So in that case, we've had to devise systems by buying bits of pipe from Mitre 10 and joining it together and putting links at each end. So the system we'd come up with for single trail was really you have a guide on the front, you have an athlete in the middle holding on to this pole loosely, and then someone at the back so they can steer it a little bit, and using that, and trying to describe all the hazards along the way. So off-road there can be a little extreme.
It must be almost like navigating in a rally car.
Yes. It became interesting when we had to sort of have a vocabulary to describe what's on the ground. Blair is one of the runners there, and he decided that he'd have a crack at Goat Pass. And I don't know if you know Goat Pass.
Goat Pass is your part of the coast to coast, isn't it?
The coast to coast one, yeah. So really the vocabulary started off with, these little rocks are kind of like tennis balls. Oh, that one's a bit rougher. As you got further, these are like soccer balls. These are a bit bigger, pillows, you know.
Pillows.
These are a bit bigger. They're kind of like folded duvets. And then, these are a bit bigger. They're like a mini car. These rocks are like a house. So, yeah, you develop a vocabulary based on the terrain, really, and you get around somehow.
I don't know about describing them as pillows and half wrapped up duvets, because that implies that they might be soft to land on.
Yeah, no, certainly nothing soft about the environment.
And so, how long have you been doing that? You must have supported a few guys through.
Only probably maybe 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just, as the need comes up, it's typically people wanting to do longer adventures. It's a bit hard to find a guide for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you've got guys coming through that was he going on to run New York? Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So both Mike and Blair had run New York.
I guess you only said this a few minutes ago, but I'm still haunted by the sound of someone running into a pole. Right, that's gonna sort of spring you into action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you? I hope you haven't had anything else like that with the group.
No, not everything goes well.
Yeah. Well, that's right. What's the saying? Everything. Something about it's all well and good having a plan, but it never works until you engage the enemy, or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, if you let your athlete crash into a fence, you sort of learn what went wrong pretty quick and modify that, because it's actually quite a trust thing.
Yeah, big time.
So, yeah.
Yeah, this is taking trust and vulnerability up a whole nother level, isn't it?
Yeah. We actually had to go one night and got some blindfolds and bungee cords and yeah, it's a pretty freaky environment. Kind of, you feel like you're stepping out in space and you're not quite sure what's around.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, that was the experience we had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's crazy. What advice would you have for someone in whatever fitness, physical, mental state for not only going for running, but to get involved in a community that can support them in whatever shape or form they're in?
So yeah, I'd suggest you just do it. Try it and see if you like it. There's a whole lot of running groups and communities around Christchurch now. There's 8 or so park runs in Canterbury. There's a lot of run groups based in various suburbs. So it's a case of turn up and try it, and you won't lose much. Just half an hour of your life if you don't like it.
And make sure you go for the coffee afterwards.
Yeah, that's it's important for me. Yeah.
Well, very important. I was hoping that maybe we could have the Yarnsmobile along to one of these, but perhaps I won't be driving it. I might make the coffees and be having the yarn, but I won't be driving it.
Yeah. Maybe you have to put the whole lot in the back of a trailer.
Yeah, I think that's something you know a bit about.
Yeah.
Well, look, Richard, this has been a hugely interesting, inspiring yarn. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the community and creating those connections. I'm sure there's many more anecdotes and positive yarns, but the impact you would have had on the people of Christchurch and Canterbury would have been amazing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. You're welcome.
Good man.